Welcome to the Association of Educational Therapists webinar, Educational Therapy, What It Is and How It Works, presented by Dorothy Ungerlighter. We are so delighted that you're here to learn more about the profession and the practice of educational therapy. AET is the National Professional Association for Educational Therapists. AET sets the standards and ethics for professional practice. You'll soon learn about what educational therapists do, but before that, I'd like to share how AET helps its members stay up to date about the latest research-based findings in the fields of education, psychology, and neuroscience. AET offers continuing education for its members by providing local and virtual study groups, professional workshops, and an annual national conference. This year, there will be 4 regional meetings in Dallas, San Francisco, Chicago, and Los Angeles. Our annual national conference will take place in the Chicago area in October 2015 with the theme, The Power of Collaborative Relationships in Educational Therapy. We're so pleased to be featuring Tina Bryson and George McCluskey. If you are interested in becoming an educational therapist, there are master's and postmaster's certificate programs that are offered either online or on campus. The online programs can be accessed from anywhere in the world. Information and links to the specific programs can be found on the AET website, www.aetonline.org. Anyone who is interested in becoming a member is welcome to check out the AET website for types of membership. Finally, I want to call your attention to the Q&A button for this webinar in the upper left of your screen. There will be a question and answer session after the presentation. If you have questions for Dorothy, please use the Q&A button to submit them at any time during the presentation. And now, I'd like to introduce Dorothy Ungerlighter. Dorothy is the founding president and a fellow of the Association of Educational Therapists. She is the author of 3 books, Reading, Writing, and Rage, Educational Therapy in Action, and Psychoeducational Perspectives. These detailed accounts of her work with clients bring alive her unique perspective on the practice of educational therapy. Dorothy is committed to bringing the principles of educational therapy to special educators and general education classrooms. She helped develop and teach educational therapy training programs at UCLA and California State University, Northridge. Dorothy also developed pro bono remedial services for underserved and delinquent youth at 3 agencies in Los Angeles. Consequently, she provided workshops for juvenile court justices on the link between learning disabilities and juvenile delinquency. And she created a screening test for the courts to identify adjudicated youth needing special services. Dorothy conducts her private educational therapy practice in Los Angeles while she continues her ongoing commitment to the expanding role of the Association of Educational Therapists. It is with great pleasure that I give you Dorothy Ungerlighter.
Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon or evening from wherever you may be listening in. I'm thrilled that you could join me, and so that I can try to answer some questions that people have about the profession. So often I'm asked, what is an educational therapist? And there's always an abiding second question. What do you do in that job? So today, I'd like to welcome you to the never boring adventure that we call educational therapy, or the initials ET for short. And no, we're not extraterrestrials, so don't confuse us with that other ET. You know, a world increasingly dependent upon specialists is in crucial need of a generalist. Someone committed to a view of the whole, the big picture. I believe ETs are the generalists of our time. What do I mean by a generalist? Someone who listens to all the voices, responds, finds answers, and calms anxiety for families looking for meaningful help. Someone who knows how to help families make sense of all those specialist reports, who knows the curriculum for a full range of grade levels and how to teach that curriculum, how to speak to the teachers in non-threatening ways so that they can collaborate. Someone who knows when and where and how to refer to other specialists when it's indicated. And also someone who knows how to balance structure with flexibility, because no two of our clients will ever be alike and no two will have the same solutions. Still, thankfully, there are threads of similarity that will be found in all of them. And the same is true for us. No two ETs will intervene in identical ways, but our general principles of practice must be the same. So first today, let's start with the most basic definition of educational therapy, this one from the website of the National Association of Ed Therapists. An educational therapist is a professional who combines the educational, note the brain, and the therapeutic, note the heart, the therapeutic approaches for evaluation, remediation, case management, and communication advocacy. Now, those are fancy terms for a process of connecting to our clients' needs and styles of function. We are attuned to the interplay, that mysterious and marvelous interplay of emotions, cognition, human development, and learning. We are helping clients gain self-understanding, to find what there is to like about themselves, what's right about them in a world where we're so focused on what's wrong, to find out how to manage their learning challenges and advocate for themselves. We are doing case management. Now, what does that mean? Well, we must advocate for them until that magical time when they can do it for themselves. Case management involves coordinating services with all the involved teachers and professionals. When managing our cases, we must become facilitators of communication among and between everyone concerned with the outcomes for our clients. In this talk today, in a few minutes, I'm going to take you behind my office door to walk in my shoes for a while with different clients. But first, let me give you some background on the core clinical principles that are the bedrock of educational therapy. We strive to, number one, develop a treatment alliance. By this, we mean a therapeutic connection with each client. With this fundamental bond, based on trust, honesty, and mutual respect, real change can happen. Individuals who learn differently need more than ever a human being who listens, responds, meets each one's needs, and advocates to make that happen. They need someone who believes in them and helps them find ways around what they can't do. Through this alliance with our clients, the clients then become a partner in the process of their own goal setting. If we start with what they want to learn, they will soon allow us to teach them what they need to learn. Number two, we need to enlist the parents and other involved professionals in the process to add their goals, as well as to help them understand the techniques we use to attain these goals. Open communication is essential. Parents need to know that the word normal has all kinds of variations. They need help in developing appropriate expectations that are unique to each of their children. Number three, we need to provide a safe place to address learning needs. It's easy to say that word, but it's so critical. Our offices must be safe havens, free from judgment and humiliation that is so common for them in school environments. In such a place, clients can take risks. They can learn from their mistakes, express concerns that might impair their capacity to learn. A crucial goal is to free each client's mind so that it can be available for learning. Number four, We have to unlock the potential for hope. I always see us as something I call psychoeducational cheerleaders. We have to help each client know that their brains are not hardwired, that brains can change and grow, adapt and improve. We validate their efforts through specific, informative feedback. If they believe in what's possible, they can aid in their own process of growth. And you'll hear more about that when you hear the stories later in this talk. One more moment on the term psychoeducational interventions. These are the non-academic ones that change attitudes or relieve roadblocks to progress. For example, one mother complained that her son never listened to her. So I asked that they reverse roles for a week. She would play the son and he would be the mom. And then when they came back, they could take each other's roles. Well, you know what happened. The mother came back and knew exactly what the boy would say, but he didn't have a clue because it turned out he never listened to his mom. And that truth came true to her very vividly in that one intervention. Another story is of a teen who was so overcome with anxiety about her less than perfect organizational skills until I told her a little known fact, that those frontal lobes of her brain that were in charge of planning, organizing, reasoning, those lobes weren't fully developed until the age of 25, and that she was, quote, still in the oven, not done yet. You can't believe the change that one bit of fact created in her acceptance of herself and her imperfections. Number 5, we have to inject humor into the learning process. We need to lighten the load at every opportunity because I think many of you know laughter wipes out tension. There's a game I love called Pygmania that we'll do before we attack math word problems. And when we do games like that that are filled with laughter and joy, the whole feeling in the office changes. All kinds of games are a critical part of an ET's practice. Number 6. Individualize your interventions. Learn what works for each client. For the kid who always loses things except his wallet, make his to-do list for the week on a Post-it note that fits in the wallet. Discover their styles and processes for mastery of learning demands. Ask them if they ever did anything that got a good grade. When they give an example, even the smallest one, ask them to tell the exact steps they followed on that test or paper that turned out to be a winner. It's amazing the insights we get from that. What we learn about their often secret strategies, we can alter our own by valuing the importance of that information. You can't believe how this one strategy changes their beliefs in themselves. Number 7, observe each client's behavior and body language. Look for the clues to the meanings behind them. A glance, a weird smile, an avoidance of eye contact, a constant fidget for certain activities. Every piece of behavior offers clues to their thoughts, concerns, and also their processing styles, how they learn. Number 8, listen with our clinical ears. We'll talk more about this in a few minutes. Number 9, foster open communication with schools and other involved professionals. This could be another whole webinar, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on that today. Number 10, refine the initial diagnostic implications through continuous observation. I can't tell you how important this principle is. Through that therapeutic bond, we constantly have opportunities to see how our clients function when they're not in a test situation and not pressured to perform. What do we observe that verifies the testing? What do we observe that disproves it? What weaknesses surface that may have been missed? What behaviors demonstrate real change over time? By sharing our insights through observation with the evaluators, we're always reassessing potential performance. Number 11, respect the ethics issues from the AET Code of Ethics. Confidentiality is a major one, but the whole code offers guidelines for every professional. And finally, number 12, be positive role models. Realize that the bond we've made in this situation gives us a unique responsibility to be aware that our clients may want to be like us in many ways. Our manners, our mode of dress, even our tone of voice and emotional temperament may all be models for emulation. I recently saw an article that said, in a digital world, there's a big disconnect on courtesy. Courtesy. There's one thing that should be easy for us to model if we take that opportunity. These principles are fundamental, but it's important to state that our key domain is education. Teach is what we do, but the way in which we decide what must be taught and how it must be taught is determined by how we listen, observe, and collaborate. We must become the third ears of the educational world. What do we mean by that? It was first coined by psychoanalyst Theodore Reich, who used that term to refer to the way in which one mind speaks to another beyond words, catching what other people feel and think but may not say. How many times have you been at a party and you listen to someone's words, but you can tell there's an unspoken meaning behind them? Maybe you sense jealousy in a comment, even though the words are sweet as butter. That's your third ear listening to more than people say. We learn to listen in that way to our clients, to listen for their fears, their doubts, their gifts, and the expectations upon them from school, family, and culture. Maybe one throwaway comment will provide a clue to their resistance one day. We listen with that clinical ear to determine why a child fails, how a child feels, and what interventions will be most relevant and effective. From our brilliant pioneer, Katrina, she wrote a very thorough paper way back in 1971. She clarified the difference between an ET and a psychotherapist. Her words are just as relevant in 2014. We are concerned with the breakdowns in learning, committed to high educational goals, concerned with the client's psychic organization that deals with reality, and reality is that key word. What we are not psychotherapists. Be assured of that. Psychotherapists direct themselves to the child's inner situation, to his or her unconscious conflicts and inner fears that interfere with functioning. With that distinction, and in order to understand the delicate path an ET must walk, come along with me now on a vicarious journey to explore that question, what do you do as an educational therapist? Let's go this week behind the proverbial closed door and look at a typical week in the life of this one educational therapist. And please be advised that these photographs are not of the real clients. This week, I made jelly with Jimmy. A third grader who is so terrified by the printed page that whenever he opens a book, he becomes immobilized, holding his breath in gasps. His face becomes distorted by fear. But if we make jelly, he will laugh, and he'll tell me the procedure we use step by step, so I can write it down as he speaks. And he'll even read back what he told me, forgetting or ignoring or maybe not realizing that this too is reading. He'll be free of the grotesque symptoms for a few moments, the moments that make the road to reading possible for him. This week, Amy's teacher refused to move 5th grade Amy out of the 2nd grade reader because she couldn't pass the required phonics test. This week, the teacher had to be helped, cajoled, guided, seduced into understanding that Amy does not hear the distinction between those sounds and may never perceive them correctly. Her auditory perceptual skills are so limited that she cannot recognize the tune of Happy Birthday when it's played to her without words. But in contrast, her visual memory skills are superior. She's an artist. Those skills have enabled her to read at grade level by sheer visual memory of whole words. Amy needs me as an ombudsman and advocate to explain about these strengths and that she needs to be evaluated differently from most kids. This week, Michael, a 5th grader who hates to write, who withholds his thoughts, who avoids social situations and remains the outsider looking in, makes a volcano with me because he loves projects. He dictates the procedure into a tape recorder. He doesn't want to dictate that procedure, and he's used to grumbling, refusing, and having grown-ups back off. But he wants the joy of that volcano, so he strikes a bargain with me, dictating first and then transcribing. By his use of the pause button, he shows me how long an auditory sequence he can hold in memory before he writes. Michael has been a not-so-secret disappointment to his older, highly successful parents. This week, his parents were amazed when I called them in to hear his recording. They never knew he owned such a vocabulary. This week, they began to look at him a little differently. This week, I worked with 16-year-old Bob, who was referred because of his constant failure on tests of grammar. Parts of speech were his problem, said Mother. Indeed, his scores on high school placement tests contrasted a 99th percentile in math with a 45th percentile in language. More telling, though, were Bob's deep sighs and heavy breathing during the most minor testing sessions we had. When I told Bob I could feel his tension so strongly that it made me tense, he looked surprised. He seemed totally out of touch with his own feelings. This week, Bob's mother reported finding cutouts in his room, cutouts of female bodies with the heads cut off and moved to different bodies, and violent cartoons he'd drawn with a hero he called Captain Slaughter. It was alarming stuff for a mother to find. She described his screaming and throwing of objects while watching his favorite football team if they made stupid mistakes. Mistakes were intolerable to Bob. Teachers who criticized were intolerable to Bob. He spoke of revenge while denying his anger. Parts of speech had opened the door to Bob's clear need for something much more serious expert psychological help. Referral was immediate. This week, I knew that Bob's needs were not in the domain of educational therapy, and it's very critical for us to know that difference. This week, 3rd grader Jack tried desperately once again to tell me what happened to his dog Troy. For over a year, this story kept peeking out from his memory, but he'd never been able to retrieve it. This week, though, Jack had a breakthrough because he's learned how to draw. He drew a rectangular shape with curved legs, and he said, "What is this?" I guessed, "Is it a table?" "Yes," he said, "but what kind of a table?" When I suggested it might be a wrought iron table, his voice rose. Yes, wrought iron, and the word triggered the memory. Out came the whole story of his dog being caught in the table and the fire department being called to free him, and he and his grandma were sent into a back bedroom to spare them the trauma of watching the procedure. But the isolation was equally traumatic for Jack. In the end, the dog was so badly hurt he had to be put to sleep. And clearly, Jack had not been spared the knowledge of that tragedy. He just wasn't able to put the feelings into words. Subsequently, we learned that Jack had a hole the size of a small lemon in the corpus callosum of his brain. The corpus callosum is the organ that links the two hemispheres of the brain. This anomaly was discovered when I referred him to a neuro-ophthalmologist because of apparent visual problems. During that eye exam, this incredibly thorough doctor noticed something unusual in Jack's retina structure, leading to the diagnostic brain scan. We then knew the source not only of Jack's visual problems, but more debilitating, his major language retrieval and learning problems. This week, Jack's drawing provided the clue to one means of retrieving the thoughts that Jack has always had locked inside. This week, Julio has called 5 nights in a row. He just needs to talk, to keep a check on reality. Julio is 20, learning disabled, a former, he assures me, gangbanger, and a drug dealer, but not user, he assures me. Julio and I go back to our first meeting 5 years ago, when I asked him what he did well that wasn't done in his gang. He told me he was such a good storyteller that the kids in the hood paid him to tell stories. So he started telling, and his telling and my recording began our bond for 2 years, until he went to jail, arrested with his gang for auto theft. We corresponded while he did time, and used that time for me to edit his letters and the spelling. We reconnected, of course, when he got out, so that I could help with his re-entry. This week and every week, Julio needs someone he can trust, who knows, quote, the system in the real world, outside the hood. This week and every week, Julio wants to do something right, to, quote, be somebody, so that others will respect him. Respect is what he longs for. This week, 14-year-old Dionne is back from traveling with her parents, and there's no way she wants to see me again. She started a new school, a new developmental phase, very pubertal, and new optimism. She still gets her homework done with less than optimal standards, but it gets done. She still denies the existence of a learning difficulty, but was always proud of the writings she could produce in our sessions. This week, she's going to get my drum rolls for her great confidence. I always do drum rolls on my desk when something wonderful happens. She'll get my wishes for her success and my business card, so she knows I'm, quote, on call when and if she needs me. Dionne needs to be in control, and I learned long ago that 14-year-olds don't really hear. They don't hear from adults. By 16, she may be ready. I know from my years of experience that when she asks for help, we can get much more accomplished in much less time. This week, I served as ombudsman for former client, 17-year-old Lily, a survivor of lymphocytic leukemia at age 3 and of the subsequent radiation and chemotherapy. This week, Lily's self-proclaimed crazy-making mother was making her usual dozens of calls to get dozens of bits of conflicting advice about dozens of possible colleges for Lily next year. This week, I convinced Mom that we must all meet, the team of teacher, school counselor, college counselor, neuropsychologist, mother, maybe dad if he has time, and me, with Lily, in one room, face to face, to resolve for Lily once and for all the procedures and directions for her to follow. With luck, that joint meeting will end the current cycle of mixed messages for all involved. Anxious, overly involved moms are a real challenge, not easily changed in their zeal for finding perfect, complete solutions. But try to imagine the effect on any mom when a child has been diagnosed with lymphocytic leukemia. Moms are another group that we could have a whole separate webinar on for all their needs. This week, Alan announced proudly in his stage voice that he loves his new school, has no mortal enemies, 3 friends, and Michelle, his teacher, should win an award for being so flawless. Who can believe this is the Alan with near-fatal asthma who could touch type at 40 words a minute a perfect report in 4th grade, but who scored below norms on all the tests of fine motor skills? This highly gifted 180 IQ youngster set his goals with me during the 2nd session, and they were all messages for his frantic mom. Number 1, stop worrying about my health. Number 2, when I do get sick, be calm and ask specific questions about what's bothering me. If I say I'd like to stay home from school, don't freak out. Number 3, I will tell you if there's something I want you to worry about. And amazingly, his mom heard him. Just by virtue of Alan's coming to see an ET, his mother felt he was receiving help. But the real help he was receiving was help getting Mom to believe he was really doing fine and stop worrying. Last week, 27-year-old Daniel, a brilliant film editor with dreams of being a director, came to me to learn once and for all the secret code of reading. What were the rules? He was exhausted from memorizing thousands of words by sight for 23 years. When I told him the wondrous fact that all English words were made from combinations of only 6 syllables, he knew that this was a reality he could learn, and he did with amazing speed. But then I discovered that Daniel's real handicap was not dyslexia. It was a condition called apraxia, inborn since his infancy. Here was a brilliant mind, sabotaged by disturbed muscular control of the oral mechanisms that impaired his execution of speech. After years of speech and language interventions and incredible parental support, he'd managed to get through school and even college. It was not reading rules he needed as much as acknowledgement of the stress he felt when trying to verbally articulate his creative ideas for film. He actually showed me how his entire tongue went into spasm when he tried to express ideas, especially if they were emotionally charged thoughts. The goals for our work were redirected to the compensations and strategies required to work around his real problem and find ways to reduce stress and appreciate his extraordinary abilities. This week, I got an email from Daniel, and here's what it said. Dorothy, I've learned the secret to growth. Growth is to expand knowledge, get bigger, to build on top of the pre-existing mass. Many years I've been climbing my own mountain of personal growth and getting more frustrated. Even at the gym, I ask myself, why am I not getting bigger? I keep tensing my muscles and hurting myself. Then the answer came to me. I had it backwards. I was pushing and pushing, and I should have been letting go. For years, my internal tension made it impossible for new, healthy energy to enter it. I needed to let go, so that's what I did. I started relaxing, meditating, doing yoga, strengthening, breathing. Now I can get my thoughts on paper. I can face a blank page and not get anxious and close the book. And most amazing, I learned that writing on paper is better than a computer, because on the computer, words can easily be thrown away, but on paper, your words and thoughts stick. I can't second guess or judge the thoughts that came out of my mind. Instead, paper gives me the ability to add, to grow, to expand my basic thoughts into bigger ideas. You showed me that I was not damaged and saw a power in me that I was afraid to confront because I didn't want to let go of what I was used to. Have an incredible day. Your student, Daniel. Can you imagine the gift of such a letter for any ET? Breakthroughs like Daniel's are what every one of us strives for. Those are the greatest rewards of all. These few vignettes can give you some sense of the range of client problems and disabilities we face every day behind that door to an educational therapy session. And here's a summary of the kinds of interventions, the range of what we do, the emotional terror of reading in the printed page like Jimmy, the auditory discrimination and word retrieval disorders that we saw in Amy and Jack, the sociocultural issues superimposed on learning disabilities like Bob's, the unique problems of highly gifted LDs like Alan, the real-life issues and inborn roadblocks of adults with special needs like Daniel and Julio. You may be asking yourselves, what are the kinds of outcomes for our ET clients? How well do they perform as adults in the real world? You may be as pleasantly surprised as I have been. When I hear what my former clients are doing, it's the reason I joined LinkedIn, so that I could catch up with everybody and hear about their outcomes. I'm hoping that AET can finally publish a volume reporting just such outcomes and success stories from all of my clients. Here are just a few examples of what some of my clients have become. One is a graduate of NYU in art and the vice president of visuals for a haute couture, I don't know how to say that, haute couture fashion designer. Another is the owner of a golf adventure program, internationally promoting the game for youth all over the globe on the computer. Third is a bank manager, and he has to wear a coat and tie every day. I laugh when I remember how he came to see me and the outfits he wore. Next comes a Juris Doctor, a lawyer and an MBA, as well as president of a prominent university alumni club. The owner and designer of a window covering business. She doesn't just make window coverings, but she repairs broken ones. And a fireman. This was a lifelong dream for this young man since the 5th grade. Next is a Princeton graduate, founder and principal at a consulting company for entrepreneurs. And finally, an oboist with a chamber music ensemble, and he later became the conductor for that whole symphony orchestra in a large city in the state of Michigan. In closing, I have to share my thoughts about change. Look around us, look at our world today, and remember what it was like in each of your childhoods. Today we see 3-year-olds on iPads at restaurants and in airport. We see everyone everywhere on their cells, even while they're crossing the street, which drives me nuts. Our students are endlessly distracted by every beeping, blinking, flashing device in their surroundings. I have no idea how their teacher is expected to hold their interest. Whole families have chats with each other on WhatsApp or Skype from 3 continents simultaneously. According to Fareed Zakaria's show last month, serious questions are arising as to whether colleges can or should survive, or whether they'll be replaced by something called MOOCs, massive open online courses that are generally free all over the world. As the real world and real life problems change, we can only speculate on the educational therapy of tomorrow. How might our roles and interventions change? Is it premature to think about that now? I think we have the seeds of a future webinar, or perhaps a whole conference by AET dedicated to all the issues of change. Hopefully your ideas about these challenges will enrich our discussion. So let's open that discussion now to the questions you have submitted, not just on the future, but on any of the information I've presented here. And thank you for your participation this morning.